This is the ALGO Podcast, episode 11 with Petya and I. In today's episode, we dive into Petya's dance and bachata origins. What is it about the style and music that keeps us so intrigued? A little bit about the methodology that she has approaching teaching, and some nuanced topics around dance in general, around the music theory in general, and how, as a teacher, her responsibility to her community and her students shapes her approach, amongst other things. If you have any specific questions or topics that you would like us to go into next time, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Petya's socials will be in the description. Hope you enjoy. Let's jump into your origins as a bachata dancer and a bachata teacher, because it's what a lot of people know you for, but you have a dance background as well. Can you take us through it?
Yeah. So I started when I was very little. Actually, it's my parents that wanted me to start doing, I guess you would call it here, sports gymnastics. You know, the one when you run, you do the jumping in the air, then you land. But in my little hometown back in Bulgaria, there wasn't any of that. So the second best thing was rhythmic gymnastics. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's basically a form of, it's a mix of gymnastics and dance together with different apparatus. So you can dance on your own, but also you can dance with a bow, with a hoop, with a ribbon. And I did that for about 15 years. I lived a long time. And that was just one of the sports I did, actually. I did also ballet, and I did aesthetic gymnastics, which is more in a team. So if you're related to dance, imagine like all the bachata teams you've seen, the shows that get together, create something. You do sometimes some lifts. And that one is without any apparatus. That's just kind of solo dancing and gymnastics together.
I would imagine that the teams or the groups you have in the aesthetic gymnastics, the average level of difficulty of the routine is much higher than like your typical bachata team.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the main difference I would say is in the lifts that we learn to do. So we would learn to lift each other. There would be no men. Would like 3 or 4 of us would jump. I was lucky enough to be a few times on top of the pyramid, if you wish. And I think the biggest thing that, like, doing gymnastics for such a long time, it was for me a way to learn discipline, a way to learn commitment. And I think that's really kind of set me up for success later on in my other life projects, not just dance. It was an important part of it.
So you kind of had a really good base for the physicality of dance before you got into bachata, because I would say the hardest part of bachata is just really the body movement. Like if you take, like, not even really the cardio aspect or the conditioning, it's
the
just
awareness.
Yeah, it's the awareness of
body awareness
of everything in your body. So your physical fitness base was basically as good as it can be.
Yeah, I was lucky in that regard, but there was also a lot of things that I needed to change because the technique would be different. So for example, as I mentioned, I did ballet as well as part of my training. And I remember when I started with salsa, because that's what I started with, as most people maybe. One of the things was that immediately after I started, like, I was doing all my turns up, like shoop, 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 because in ballet you'll be like going up, and then I immediately had to change the way I turned to be like lower and grounded. So that was like a fundamental technique change. So I actually struggled with that. So as much as a dance can be an advantage, or a certain dance background could also in some cases be a bit of a hindrance and actually make it more challenging for you, because you almost have to unlearn a certain way and then adapt that. So I wouldn't say it was always like, you know, it was always the best thing ever. There were some things that I had to like, wow, I need to change that. But I think what it really gave me, as I said, it's the understanding of commitment, hard work, persistence, repetition, training, all of these things that I think people really want to get good at, have to do, but don't want to. A lot of people don't want to. A lot of students struggle with the practice, with the technical aspects of it. So that was kind of a good start for me, the fact that I had that knowledge. And that helped me as a teacher later on, because I understand body mechanics, how the body works, versus if you've just started as a general person, it will take you a longer time to understand how your body works. And therefore, if you want to teach that, completely different animal.
Why is it you think a lot of students don't want to put in the repetition, the drill work, the persistence? Is it because it's a general thing they're just not used to, or maybe they don't they enjoy the dance purely to the point where it stops being fun and it actually feels like work? What kind of reasons do you think they have?
Number one, I think as a society, the world we live in nowadays, attention spans are so quick, right? We're used to instant gratification all the time. We're given instant gratification through social media, through like so many different channels. So our patience is just short-circuited. So I think that makes it hard for people to do the boring stuff, the drilling in, the being quiet with yourself, and just really kind of getting in tune with your own body. Because that's where dance starts. Dance starts with your own body first. Before you even think about partner dancing or solo dancing, you need to connect to yourself. It's how I feel, and that's why that aspect, I think it's often overlooked, in favor of the more fun, like kind of other types of things or activities you can do.
You mentioned you have to be a dancer and be aware of your own body before you go into partner dance. Do you think that is a big reason why, if you look at just say followers in general versus leaders in general, it's very rare to see a good follower who's also not a good dancer, but it's a lot more common to see a good leader who's not a good dancer. Because if you take the follower out of the equation of the partner dance, you just make them do the moves by themselves. To follow, you have to be aware of your own body, and the whole point is that you have to hold your own. So if you separate them from the leader, it still looks good and they look like they are dancing. Whereas with leaders, a lot of the time, for whatever reasons, the focus is just how do you make the follower look good, and then the difference between like your average good social leader versus the bachata couples, for example, is the leader also look really, really good as well. Yeah. Their body movement is on point. So do you think that plays any part in why some of the leaders are great leaders, but they don't look good as dancers, but followers, if they're good, they also look like good dancers?
I think it all starts again, like it's a little bit of a social issue, let's say. Even if you think just going to the clubs, right? Like the girls who always like go out and like just have fun, versus the guys, the cool way, it's just kind of like looking and just nodding your head. And so even from a young age, it's almost like that's what you see. So maybe if you're a guy who's a little bit more expressive, if you go on the dance floor and be more dancing, you might be ridiculed. Versus if the girls go as and dance, like she'll be applauded. So there's a little bit of that. That's outside of the dance, like social dance concept at all. It's just a little bit in the general world.
That's actually I've never thought about that. And it makes a lot of sense. Guys aren't really encouraged to dance in that way generally. Okay.
And that's why girls almost come in with like one foot forward, because they're used to a little bit more dancing in everyday situations or scenarios. It's more socially acceptable versus maybe it's a little bit more frowned upon, or it's not cool, it's not a good look, whatever, or they may classify it as something. So I think a lot of men could feel self-conscious about moving in general. So when they come into a dance class, they feel stiff, they feel like, I don't know my body because I've never had the chance to play with it and a chance to experiment with it, versus followers have had that chance, or women in general.
As a lead and as a guy, I can testify to that very much. On top of the already like baseline level of stiffness that guys typically have, there's also a mental stiffness in that they feel like they are being restricted or they're not encouraged to go about it. When I train dance, there's this joke we have where I actually move best when I'm trying to do something as a joke, or when I'm like doing a goofy move. Whereas when I'm actively trying, it's almost like that block then comes in and I'm just not moving as free. And body movement is something I'm consciously trying to work on now. So letting go of that mental thing. When I was younger, I still don't see myself as a dancer now. I just see myself as someone who dances. But I always heard dancers say like, just let yourself go and just like let your mind be in the moment and whatever. I never really understood what that meant. But now, as I'm diving more into that world, when I look at people doing solo dance, I can just see it on their face. Like they are in it and they just let go. And honestly, a part of me is jealous because it seems so freeing and it seems so liberating. Exactly. That I just think like, I'm probably holding on to so much internal stuff because I can't let go to get to that point.
And think about on your point, like dance historically, right? Just taken it out of social dancing, people dance to summon goddesses, to like, it was a cultural thing to dance together in the past, right? When before, but then nowadays the society became a little bit more separated into gender roles, and the guys had to be a little bit more serious, a little bit more stoic, if you wish. So I think that freedom was taken away from them a little bit. So therefore you get to this where men coming into class, they will feel a little bit more. But then also there's the teaching aspect of that. And I think it's our roles as teachers, as people with like some sort of influence into the community, to speak about the leader dancing and not just leading. And that comes from the top. That comes from the teacher disseminating that knowledge. So when I dance as a lead, I actually incorporate a lot of body movement in addition to me leading a move. I don't do very complicated stuff in my leading, but obviously my connection to the music is my number one. But the second thing is I find the space to find self-expression within my leading. And when I teach as a lead, that's what I want to teach the leaders as well, that they have that space. And it's not just about making the follower move. They need to move their own bodies so they can feel joyful. Because I also, for a lot of leaders, say this. I was like, oh, I just kind of get bored because as a lead, I only do what I know in a dance night. I don't know if you've ever been in that space.
I've felt that many times before.
So then at some point at the dance, it becomes boring for you because like you only do what you know with every single follower. Versus for followers, why is it that, again, usually the socials are more skewed towards followers, like the ratio of attendance, it's more followers because followers get so much exposure to different lists. They have more diversity in their social dancing night, so they have more fun. But for me, there is a way for the leaders to have that amount of fun. Like when I lead and follow, or just lead, I've had nights I've purely lead, I have a different dance every time because I managed to, through the music and through expression, to make it fun and different for myself. And hopefully I can teach more leaders how to do that as well.
It's very interesting, a lot of what you just said. So we are definitely conditioned as leaders to not really think about ourselves in the dancer perspective. So like the example that comes to mind is what's the movie called with the big lift at the end?
Dirty Dancing.
That one.
That's a classic.
There was a interview with, what's the main actor's name?
Oh, I forgot his name. I'm terrible with names.
Whatever it is, there was an interview with him, and as far as I'm aware, he has a relative dance background, and they did some mambo in the movie. There was this thing where he said, your job as the leader is to frame something like, it's to make the woman look good, it's to put the attention on there, it's to frame the picture.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I get it, but on the other hand, you gave the example of, as the leader, you feel bored doing the same moves over and over again, because the blessing of being a follower is you are either taken up to the level of your leader, or like much higher than you are, or you're relegated down to the limit of it. I, thinking back now, it was a subconscious shift, but since I've recently started focusing on myself a lot more while trying to lead, it makes all the dances a lot more fun. So my question to you would be, because you also mentioned stoicism and it's not really linked to dance.
Yeah.
I did a project this week where the topic was like a bunch of men come together and talk about masculinity. The idea of stoicism came up. I'm someone who believes, or I'm someone who tries to be a stoic person. It's a philosophy that I quite like, but I also like dance quite a lot too.
Yeah.
And as I try and do the two together, I can say like dance is not associated with stoicism. But then does that mean a man shouldn't dance? No. So if I'm a student coming to you, let's say I've never done dance before, but I'm very much into like the stoic principles and the schools and whatever. So I tell you, Petya, my brain does not associate dance with being the kind of man I want to be. But I really want to dance. Would you have an answer for that? Because it's a very big question.
I think it's a very interesting question. I think we should not be just one thing. For me, the way I show up to my dance classes is I show up the best version that I can be in that dance class for my students. When I show up to work, for example, I show a slightly different version of me. So I think you can adapt depending on where you are, who you're with, what kind of environment you're in, which parts of yourself you express. And therefore, there's no conflict. You don't have to be wanting, you don't have to be stoic or express that stoically 100% of the time. You can choose that one outlet, like dance, for example, that could be your way to experiment and be something different. And that's okay as well. So you don't have to be either or. You can be both.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that a lot. What is it about bachata specifically that draws you to that as a dance? Because you have a history with a lot of different styles, but I would say now it's one that you're focusing on the most.
Yeah.
What is it about it? Is it the music? Is it the type of connection you get? What is it?
I love that question. The first thing that I remember making the shift, right? Let me take you a step back. I started with salsa. That was my first dance. And I was into it, like for a whole year. I was like intensely doing salsa, which really helped with my technique, I have to say. But one thing that was such a big change for me is when I started going to socials in London and I discovered the different sub-styles of bachata. So obviously there is a little bit of, let's say, interesting conversations around the names and what is bachata traditional, like whether you should even say Dominican. We all know that. I won't get into that. For the purposes of just my experience, I would define it. I just knew bachata as this one thing. I've experienced a few classes, but then I discovered, okay, you have the Dominican, more traditional bachata music, which is a lot more like the energy is fun, different, it's hips, it's like there's so much self-expression opportunities. There's obviously the modern one, which is more the influence of salsa and like how bachata teachers transformed how they created based on salsa moves. Obviously you have sensual bachata, big influencers, Corky and Judith. But then also nowadays you have a fusion bachata, which is a lot more, and again, that's connecting to the music, which I'll talk to in a bit. But purely for me, my main attractors was the diversity within a dance, within the bachata structure, which meant that I can go on a night and I can have a nice, slow, connected dance to a sensual song, or I can have a super fun Dominican dance on a Dominican song, or I can have something a little bit more middle-paced with like moderna and more turny that's more relating to my other salsa and ballet background. So for me, it was like the full package of a dance style. The second thing was that diversity in the energy that I just couldn't get all in one place in the same dance, because I also dance kizomba and I love it, but it's very much about connection. And I think like for 4 hours, if I'm on a social, I kind of want something a little bit more dynamic. And this is kind of where bachata became my favorite. And zouk was actually my second favorite thing. And zouk is an interesting one because even though we haven't spoken about it, but at the moment it's making big waves into the London community. And yeah, we can talk a little bit more about it if you want to. That's an interesting current topic.
I don't know much about zouk from whatever limited stuff I've seen, but I do know that ironically, it seems like a big reason why, or the biggest reason why you like bachata is because it is maybe influenced by so many other things and you get the versatility, which is ironic because that's why a lot of people dislike it, because it depends who you ask, like more established teachers in the older generations, more stuck in their ways, they don't like the change full stop just because it's a change.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are new to it come into it because it's a combination of like there's bacha kiz, there's bacha zouk. Certain moves that I learned in bachata I didn't realize actually came from kizomba, or like all these new head
zouk.
Zouk, all these new head turns, all of these, whatever.
Yeah.
What I want to know is what is it about what aspect of versatility does bachata have that maybe salsa doesn't have? Because me personally, I'm very much a salsa guy. I like both.
Yeah.
But when I think of the versatility in salsa, what I think is something like, because you have the big three, which is Cali, crossbody, and Cuban. And typically they are danced separately. Cuban to Cuban music, crossbody to mambo, Cali to whatever, Colombian music. But my favorite dances are the ones where you can mix everything together. You are limited to the kind of song you'll have to do because it's very hard to get a song that balances the energy of a mambo like DJ Hendrix versus something very upbeat in Cali.
Yeah.
But that, for me, is the kind of versatility that I would love to have in a dance, to be able to balance that kind of stuff. What is it that maybe salsa lacks or bachata has that steers you more towards bachata?
I think for me, it's not so much that salsa lacks something, right? But for me, my personality, how I am, I'm very much a person who likes to experience different things, who likes to have a dynamic experience. And for me personally, because I fell in love with the bachata music, that's what steered me more. I'm not saying that salsa is not a dynamic dance. For sure, there's so much into it. But I fell in love with the bachata music. And that's the sort of thing. That's why in my classes, like obviously, I don't. There's a content to teach. There's some moves or some body movement or technique, but I pretty much always connected to the music of why I do something. It's because the music tells me to do that. So my number one reason for loving bachata is the music, and therefore the dynamics that it can offer. Even though they might be controversial, and again, some people don't like remixes, right? Some people don't like the phrase of Dominican bachata versus just beat bachata. We all know about that. But for me, the diversity is actually a huge like selling point for me. That's why I'm there, because it gives me everything I need.
That makes sense. I do have to say, I do sometimes, if I'm just, I describe salsa as like steak and bachata as just dessert in general. I used to say cheesecake, but now it's just dessert, because you get so many different kinds of desserts. You get vanilla, chocolate, pistachio ice cream, you get cheesecakes, you get red velvet cakes, whatever. There's a lot of sweet stuff in bachata, and it's nice. Whereas salsa is has the variety, but the variation of energy is a lot different. And if I was to casually listen to the music of one, it would be bachata, because it is quite nice. What's your opinion on the bachata remixes that are coming out?
There's some good ones and there's some bad ones, right? I think we can all agree to that. Obviously, I don't like the super simplistic one. They've just added the percussions of the bongo and then it's a bachata. So obviously that's a little bit too simple. And also the phrasing in some of them, it doesn't feel like bachata, right? I can still appreciate if the song has the right energy, but for me, like, it's still important to respect the instruments. And again, I won't be dropping names or anything, but it's just there's some DJs that really do a great job of creating a mix and creating a bridge between those modern elements that people enjoy in traditional pop or hip hop music and like the traditional instruments in bachata, and respect the traditional rhythms in bachata, and then they translate that very well together. So that's where I'm just like, that just feels amazing to dance with. So, yeah.
Linking to that, you have I think anyone that dances with you, I think I remember our very first dance. I want to say it was Coyote Ugly. It was a Tuesday or something.
I think it was, yeah.
And this would have been maybe like a year and a half ago, something like that. I think it's safe to say any leader who dances with you straight away notices you have a very unique way of playing with the music, which then translates to how you express yourself in the dance. Was it something that came naturally to you, or was it something that took conscious effort? So for me, for example, I'm trying to work on my musicality a lot more, and I think it is showing, but it was not natural at all. I didn't know where the beat was, I didn't know where whatever. The idea of musicality was very foreign, so to me it was learned. To you, was it something innate? Was it purely learned, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah. So my process was, first of all, I always felt connected to the music in a way that even if I didn't know anything about it theoretically, right? Like how it works, the phrases, the instruments and all of that, I just felt emotionally connected to it. And therefore, when I was dancing, even at the beginning, I can see the smile on the face of the other person because I was connected to the music, I was connected to them. And I'm a generally quite a positive person, so I think my personality plays a role in that. So I smile a lot during the dance. I appreciate, my leader. I appreciate the music. I appreciate the environment. So that makes me joyful. So that was number one. Naturally, I felt attracted, and naturally, I was expressing it. But then I wanted to get more into it and a little bit more structured and understand a little bit more about it. So that's where I kind of started learning and trying to listen to more music, unlayer it. So if you think about the layers of the different music and how it works, the different instruments, I started to try to train my ear to isolate different instruments that I hear. So there was a lot of conscious effort that came to it. It wasn't just I woke up one morning and I was like, I know exactly what to do, when to do it, on which instrument. It was pretty much a lot of conscious effort, a lot of training on my own, with the music, with my headphones, like listening to the music so I understand it. And then step 3 in the process was, okay, now my brain has a map of what's going on. What can I do? What kind of journey can I take to get to the final destination? And can I take different journeys every time to get to the same destination? What I mean by that, if you have a phrase, one bar, you have 1 to 8. But you have so much space for self-expression and how to get there and how to do that, that I started trying to experiment with different concepts and play with it. And that's why some people ask me a lot of times, oh, like, how did you like develop your style? Did you learn from anyone? And of course I've taken classes, but I've always tried to develop my own styling and my own interpretation of it. So when I teach my students, I can give them something different than what's already out there. But also the way I teach it, it's just a suggestion, right? So I teach you exactly how I do it. So you have the option and I want you to do it in the social. But then I also try to evoke their brain to think a little bit creatively. Can I get there a little bit differently? Can I exit a little bit differently? One thing that I talked about in my social styling class recently was, if you think about a starter, main, and dessert, similar to yours, but it was like how you get into a move. So that's the intro, that's the starter, your main dish, your main thing that you're doing, and then your exit. How do you exit a move? What's your dessert, right? So like for me, that was kind of the analogy that I was going for, and I was like, this is the main styling I'm doing here, but how I get into it, these are 3 versions, and then how I can get out of it, these are 3 versions. And then it's like, think if you can think of a 4th, challenge for you, homework for you. So it's always like I try to give specific content, the technique, the safety behind it as well, but also steer their minds a little bit.
We've gone into the realm of teaching a little bit, which I love. This leads me to 2 questions, but also a quick story. You were there. It was, I think, it was your first musicality workshop ever.
Yeah.
And there was an aspect of safety that you did in a move.
Yeah.
I think it was a rompo into a shadow position.
Yeah.
And it's very rare to go to any lesson where, one, that they break it down properly and whatever, but to actually mention the safety aspects of things. So I remember, I think, at some point it was brought up in that class, I think because we were on the subject of safety, so you kind of allowed that point to come up and someone talk about it. It was when they flick the arm back and bring them in, sometimes it can feel a bit forceful, sometimes it can feel a bit impactful. And at some point was raised where just a simple way of cushioning their reverse with you backing into it as well, rather than you flicking them away and then coming into a wall, you flick them away and then as they come back, you just cushion it a little bit. Even that small detail, I know to followers would make such a big difference in a social dance, because it doesn't matter how connected you are, it doesn't matter how whatever. If you're getting whacked all the time, even if it's like subtle impact, it will...
You'll be bruised by the end of the night.
You'll be bruised. It will cause a little bit of annoyance. You'll be like, okay, another one. So that's just something that's really nice that you do, that I know you do, because I went to your workshop, that I just wanted to say explicitly for whoever's watching so they know. But the 2 questions it leads me to are, you said you give them suggestions as opposed to orders. The idea of strict routines or moves versus here's whatever works best for you. Whatever works best for you, is that a perspective you had from when you started teaching, or is it something you had to develop? Because in order to give them options, you need to know your stuff. Like different ways to do the Madrid step, for example. You need to know how to do it if you tell them. Different ways to lead a lateral wave. Something that was like fundamentally changing for me is I always used to lead face-to-face isolations with my frames up here because it's how it was taught. But then I learned the 3-point connection, which is much more comfortable. Whereas
different methodologies.
Whereas some people would genuinely prefer and feel comfortable here. So is that a perspective that you had when you started teaching, or it's like the more knowledge you got, then you realized, oh, there are actually different ways to get into this. There are 3 entries, there are 3 exits.
For sure, as anything you start in life, teaching is a different skill set than dancing.
I wish more people understood that.
I wish so as well, because there's a lot of that going on in the scene. Like the moment someone becomes a good dancer, there's like, oh, let me start teaching, be a teacher. Obviously, it's easy because there are no strict barriers to entry for the dance industry. There's no regulation, and again, that's giving us a lot of options, and it's good. But what I would like to encourage students is to really know who they're learning from, because how you teach and understanding dance technique is so key. So then you can dance safely. You can dance with the music, and you can dance in a way that feels good to you, right? A lot of the classes are focused on moves, and that's not the way I teach. For me, teaching wise, there are 3 pillars of teaching. So engage, educate, and entertain. The 3 E's of teaching. I try to incorporate and mix and match all 3 concepts in any class I have. And I won't go into it too much because it's going to be like another hour, but there's a lot about the psychology of that and how that works together. And when I show up for a class, anything I do is for the students, versus what I see a lot of dancers who come into it with an ego, and it's all about myself and showing myself. Your job as a teacher is all about the student, right? One way you can do that is be inspirational and obviously have a good demo at the end, because then that makes them, I want to learn that, I want to look. But if you think about it, they're not, I want to, keep coming to your workshops because I want to keep watching you. No, I want to keep coming to your workshops because I want to keep developing, learning, and look and feel like you one day and feel that joy that you're feeling. So coming back to teaching and like how that developed for me, it was very much a conscious effort to almost be from a beginner teacher to an advanced teacher, if you think it in dance terminology. So I try to obviously learn as much as possible from other teachers as well, but I also tried really hard, and something I'm working on actively right now is I'm creating my own methodology that's based on my unique combination of experiences and skills, which is coming from a classical dance background with ballet technique, gymnastics, aesthetic, learning teams, working in a team together. To also, I took some classes in hip hop, a little bit of that, so I understand a little bit of that concept as well, all the way to how you translate that for social dancer minds and people who've never danced in their life. In my teaching, I try to use as many metaphors and analogies as possible to relate that to everyday experiences. So that makes the learning a little bit more relatable and easy to digest. So there's so much I can talk about teaching. But yeah, it was something that I had to work consciously on and develop as a teacher. And I think to kind of pinpoint on your question specifically, I try to explain the same technique at least in 2 different ways if I can. Example, for example, if I'm teaching a head roll for the followers, one thing you can say is obviously you can contract your right side, so then obviously your chest is the first thing that goes, the head is always a consequence of your movement. But then also you can think about opening your left side of your rib cage. It's the same thing, but taught in a slightly different way or explained in a slightly different way. That's a very technical example. But like if I'm talking about like putting your frame, I talk about a tabletop position, because everyone's sitting down on table to eat, right? If I start to do that, some people do this, some people will do this. I also use funny expressions like I say, imagine you have 2 eggs underneath your arm, but not 2 watermelons. So there's a lot of aspects that I developed in my own methodology and how I teach to make sure that people are engaged, people are educated, and people are entertained. So then that translates into their learning and sticks with them a little bit more.
That works really well as well because as you were saying, engage, entertain, educate, or educate, entertain, that is very much how people are succeeding on social media with non-dance related stuff. Anything, like even me as a personal trainer, that is actually the exact thing I try and follow as well. And if it works online, with the reduced attention span that we have when we're on our phones, it works even better when it's in person. So that makes sense. And it's hearing you talk, 1, very passionately, but 2, very in-depth, that you've clearly thought this through. Like there is a methodology to it. Whether it's someone else's or yours, it exists. You care enough to have gone out of your way to learn it. Whereas a lot of, not even just newer teachers, but just some of the established teachers as well. Again, not naming anyone, but you will go to the classes where there may be people who I've known for a very I say very long time. I haven't been doing this that long. There would have been people that I have known on a personal level. Then maybe after a year of knowing them, I go to one of their classes just because I happen to be there or whatever. And then immediately, whether it's they just seem like they don't care, they just seem like they're not engaged, they're not interested in the students, like the exact opposite of everything that you said. I've never, aside from the workshop, I haven't been to your classes, but I've seen the snippets online and it looks engaging, it looks entertaining, and it looks educational. That technical example of the head roll, I had a similar thing when it came to chest isolations because it's hard enough teaching people awareness of their own body. It's another thing to be aware of how different people can connect with it, so you as the teacher can help them. So when I was learning my chest isolations, I would always focus, because I heard that's what you need to do, on your back muscles, because that's kind of what's contracting. Then someone told me, just focus on the feeling of your core actually rotating, like this is the axis and your chest is going around it. And instantly made a difference. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So my next question
I love that.
It's really cool. I'm trying to think if there's been any other one. Learning waves and body rolls and trying to improve them a bit more as well. Again, I was taught that a wave is yes, it's not varying in level, but I was taught it's very stationary like this. But then I got the easy example of once you go forwards, as you start to go back, actually lift your chest up and then pretend like you're going back. And then instantly made a difference again. Learning the body roll, as soon as you come up, right before I go back, they just said, lean back, like you're trying to open something up. And it's really cool when those small things click as well. So yeah, it's really, really cool.
It's not really negating the other technique. They could be both true at the same time, but communication and language and delivery and how you express something matters so much, because that's what people learn differently, right? If you're talking, think coming back like teaching and the art of teaching on its own, some people are visual learners, some people are auditory. I do a lot of sounds in my classes as well. So if I'm doing isolations, things like that, I try to cover all types of learners. Some people are obviously more hands-on. You have to be aware that that's the art of teaching. So many teachers don't know about these things. And therefore, you're missing a little bit on that on your class. And I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm not saying I know everything. I keep learning every day. I'm a firm believer that every day is a school day. But for me, my passion comes from the fact that I love being a teacher and I love being a dancer. They're two different things. But when I'm there to do a teaching job, to deliver a lesson, I am there to help people grow and feel more confident about themselves, be more in tune with their bodies, so they have more fun. Because for a lot of people, social dancing is an outlet of a stress release from their busy, stressful jobs or lives or problems at home or anything like that. So when they come, they want to feel joyful. And one way to do that, if they have a good class, when they learn, they grow. But also when they go on the dance floor, because they're more connected to their bodies, they're more connected to the music when I teach musicality, they're more connected to their partners, they're more connected to their self-expression because they know social styling, then they have a much more amazing time. And that's what I love seeing. That's why I love teaching, is seeing that smile, that joy on their faces. And that's what makes me feel fulfilled and makes me feel good about myself and going into classes and doing that job.
So you mentioned social styling a couple times. What is it? Because I would imagine, because before today, I'd never heard of it. I imagine a lot of people haven't heard of it either. What is social styling? Yeah.
So that's a concept that I kind of came up 3 years ago. 2021 was after a pandemic, and it was born after some reflection of what is it that I feel like it's missing in our community and what is it people are not really getting. And I felt like there's a lot of partner classes, and I'm not even gonna go into the fact that a lot of the times those partner classes unfortunately are skewed towards more the leader side and how to lead that, and there's not enough attention paid to the technical aspects of the follower. But also there's the footwork or styling classes, which are more choreo based, which is again really good for developing your maybe connection to the music or giving you ideas of how you can express certain parts of the music in a way. But what I found when I was learning is that a lot of those classes you're just taught this choreo and this is the way it needs to go and this is the way you dance this part. Now, when I teach what I call like musicality styling classes, With them, I still may choose a snippet of a song that I would express, and I'll give you a specific routine to go over, but I'll tell you my thought process behind that, and I'll tell you which instruments you're expressing at that moment. So I'll tell you, look, here I'm listening to the voice, and this is the movement I'm doing with my hands to express the voice, and then here I'm going to be listening to the bongos, and I'm going to express that with my shoulders. However, at the end of the class with the record routine, once you know the structure and the story, you can take a different path, and next time you dance this, maybe you can express with your foot the bongo, or maybe you can express with your body movements and with your arms the voice. So I always try to give specific, to pay attention to technique detail, give specific content to cover and take away home, but also inspire and give a little bit of a different way to think about each piece. So then you keep developing even after my workshop is done. There's a bit of an after learning that happens and a little bit of reflection. With social styling, I felt there is a gap of how do I express myself within the framework of the leader and the timing that I have. For me, there's these little, what I call opportunity windows that arise in specific positions in bachata, where you have more space, or there are common moves that we do all the time that followers have space and opportunity to do their own thing, right? And that's not just styling, because like, oh, you're taught you just lift your hands, but connecting it to the music. If you're in the verse, if the song is softer, you can do this option. If you're in the mambo section, well, let me give you another example. If you're in the chorus, that's the favorite one, and then the mahau is going, and you can really feel the percussion, you can really feel the bongos, then I suggest dynamic styling variations versus in the verse of like softer styling variations. And I try to teach the followers to listen to what's happening and then adapt their styling to that within the framework and the timing and the space that they have with common bachata moves like turns or Madrid step or shadow position. So that was something that I felt bridged the gap between like styling workshops, choreo-based footwork, and like partner work classes, where you can have that space for the followers to really experiment and try different variations depending on what they hear in the space they have. So hopefully I've only done one. Well, that was the second. That was the second workshop that I did. The first one was 3 years ago, but then I kind of updated my methodology, and I'm still like adding ideas and testing techniques and exercises. So hopefully, based on the feedback I got, I'll do that a lot more. But that's something that I'm passionate about, because a lot of times followers restrict of what the leader is giving them in the dance. I'm trying to teach them where is it that you can safely express. Where is your space? Where is your elbows? Where they should be if you're turning. That's some of the things we covered in the workshop. And also like what's your timing by when you need to finish your styling so you don't disturb the lead.
It's cool to...
So I'm very passionate about this, and I'll give you a bit of an overload. But...
It's good. It's rare to see someone be this into something that they do, and it's very interesting to hear it, but it's also cool to see you like wanting to jump out of your chair and just get all of the love that you have for it out there and express it. Because I know we're conscious of time, I'm just going to skip ahead to a couple of things that I do want to cover. So community building. As a teacher, you are in a unique position to influence the atmosphere and the culture of the scene you're in, the lessons you have, the people that are new to the dance scene. What is it that you try and do, or how is it you try to be so that you can steer it in a more positive direction? Because all kinds of nonsense happens that we ideally would not be happening. What is it that you do, or the kind of person that you try and become, so that they have good experiences with it?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Again, one of my biggest frustration that I've seen is like dance classes just being focused on dance moves. One thing that I always try to get is a bit of dance etiquette. So you start on a good foot, basically. You start on a good in a good positive way, and that's how to ask the follower, how to like be gentle, because it happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to a lot of followers, being taken by a hand and just dragged to the dance floor. There's so much about the dance that starts before you even hit the dance floor. And it's a simple way of how to ask, smile for your hand. Obviously, things like, smelling good, hygiene, these are things that we need to talk about because we're such close proximity to each other. So I think it's important to teach dance etiquette and teach safety as well. So the example you mentioned earlier, like how to soften a rupo, for example, rompo and then into shadow position. That's so important because like I don't want to make the leader feel like I'm squashing. I don't want to hit my whether it's a lead or is a follow. If I'm doing some styling, I've seen, and I'm sure maybe it happened to you as well, but it happened to me when I was leading, elbows in the face. And so these two are such big parts, in addition to everything else I teach, which is technique, which is musicality, which is movement, awareness, and obviously certain content and certain variations to give you dictionary for your dance style, for your dance, for your social dancing.
So you consciously choose to talk about the safety and the etiquette so that at least they, one, know that it's expected or that they're aware of it, because it's the minority of people. But I know some guys give the followers unpleasant experiences because, like, again, very small minority, but they just don't know. Like, whether it's they don't know how forceful they're being, whether they don't know how to make them comfortable in this position. Sometimes, again, because some teachers are doing madness, whether it's even knowing what places are okay to touch. Like, again, to lead this technique, your hands never need to go here, for example. It's about the frame and the connection. And in theory, you can do it without touching anything with certain things.
I call these the red zones. So it's very simple, like obviously no. And like, I have some jokes that I usually say to like let the kind of the mood be a little bit fun, but sometimes I say, look, in this position, this is me, this is you, and then in between, so we leave space for Jesus, just like a little joke, and then people get cracked up, but it teaches the importance of space in this close space that we are, and being respectful. So absolutely, I think it's a teacher's responsibility to explain these things, so then both leaders and followers feel respect. Because I have to flip the coin and tell you an example. When I was leading a girl, and she was just touching me everywhere. So I understand, obviously it happens a lot with the followers feeling uncomfortable, but also it can happen with the leaders feeling uncomfortable. And it's because the followers will be touching their face, touching their body, and so I think it's a problem faced by both sides of the community, and it's really important for the teachers to emphasize this and how to do this safely in a way that's respectful. If I dance with someone for the first time and I don't know them like at all, like there's a little bit more space that I would give and put, and maybe I wouldn't be so expressive with my styling. If it's someone that's a very close friend of mine and I feel very comfortable with, I may allow myself to be a little bit more, let's say, sensual, or like obviously never inappropriate, but like more connected and emotional with them, only if they give me the same energy back, obviously, because that's where the connection happens and it's beautiful. But we as teachers, we need to explain those things. We have to be like, this is yes, this is no, this is what you should and shouldn't do, so then both parties feels good and feels respectful.
And I think that's something that goes a lot deeper, again, into how society reacts to certain harassment of all kinds, not just in the dance world. Because one thing that we do know is there is a problem with how men treat a lot of women. But something that is not paid much attention to is how, whether it's the men or the leaders, how the followers act in return. So, like you said, when they're way too touchy, like that's one of the biggest reasons I'm not that much of a fan of sensual bachata with strangers or even people I know, because I am not gonna, it is easier for me to just not dance with someone rather than accept a dance that I know would be nice if you wouldn't have your hands all up in my hair, for example. But I also know it's tricky because who am I to tell you how to dance? I'm just not gonna dance. It's easier because you have people, different people have different physical boundaries with it. Some people are okay with touching foreheads with each other. Some people are okay with stroking the hair. Some people are okay with looking like there is no space for Jesus in between and whatever. So it's, for me, I found the simplest ways to just not dance with the person. But even like there's an example that comes to mind about 2 years ago. It was a more casual dance night. So there were people that maybe weren't dancers, but you can't really tell until you dance with them. There was this one lady who I'm surprised I didn't notice beforehand, because once we started dancing, it was very obvious, but she was drunk as heck. And she was just throwing herself on me, and it was not really nice. But
in your lower back is like
and not even my lower back, it's like my face. I'm like, can you not be so close? I can smell your wine or whatever. So that leads into my next question, and I think it's a nice...
Before we move on,
Yes.
can I just, because you said something interesting,
Yes.
in addition to the harassment part, you also mentioned, I'm trying to remember how you phrase it, but it was about the roughness that you mentioned, some leaders, how they feel, right? Like,
that they don't know how firm,
yeah,
too firm they're
how
being.
they form there, and how that may feel very jarring.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just important to mention that's why I believe swapping roles is so important.
Oh, yeah.
Because understanding how the other side feels, it makes you so much more appreciative to the journey they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen followers who are rude in classes because the leaders are not getting, and then they complain. And then the moment I turn it around and get them to lead, I was like, oh, this is so hard. I have to think about so many things.
Yeah.
It's such a mind shift.
Yeah.
But also on the roughness side of it, like if the followers try to do that to the leader, say, oh, that doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
then they understand what they shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's been a recent kind of, let's say, trend, and a lot of people are doing role reversal stuff, and I actually think that could be so beneficial for the community, because understanding the other role could massively shift your perspective on things and make you a little bit more kind about the journey of other person, but also again, how not to. I 100% believe it makes leaders softer once they get on the receiving end. So I think I think the challenge with that is a lot of leaders feel that their masculinity is affected if they try to follow. Mm-hmm. But I would love to see more people being comfortable, understanding it's not about your masculinity or your femininity, because when I lead, I don't necessarily let go of my femininity. I can if I want to, but I don't have to. And I think it's the same for the leaders. But this is dance, and understanding technique both ways goes. It's just so beneficial for you.
Mm-hmm. And especially, again, just the final note to end on, because masculinity is such a personal thing to a lot of men. Like, I know it is to me on some level. The hardest thing for me when I started following was just letting go of control.
Yeah.
Because a lot of leaders will do this kind of dance and go into it with this outlook of it's like a power trip to them because I'm a leader. I'm not even leading, because leading shouldn't be you tell them what to do. It's that you suggest them and then whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, I am leading, therefore I am boss. I am el jefe. I'm the chief, whatever.
Yeah.
So even the idea of letting someone else, like, let alone another man or let alone a woman, like, a lot of people will take that to heart. For me, it was very much just, I just don't like not being in control.
Yeah.
But then it's about finding people that you're comfortable with to let that control go too. Mm-hmm. There was one final thing. It was doing masculinity, the firmness. Another thing that's a small thing is being open. Just because we're in the same class together does not mean I am above you giving me feedback or a suggestion.
Yeah.
So what I sometimes do is, this is what I do at work with my clients in the gym or people that I don't even know. I just say, would you mind if I make a suggestion that might help? Mm-hmm. And then immediately you can tell, like, oh yes, please, please, please. Because a lot of the time they look like they know what they're doing, but the minute you offer help, they're like, please, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I would love that help.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I think you're turning late because try this, whatever. Or, something like that. Just be open to feedback, because the higher level classes you go to, the more dead on the inside they kind of seem. That's why I love teaching beginners, because they have that spark and they're actually like, what's your name? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas you go to like the intermediate advanced or whatever, it's like, all right, my turn. whatever. So
the dynamics are different.
The dynamics
100%.
are very different. And it's very much like, I'm the student, but you're the teacher here to serve me. Like, I want to learn this, so I'm just here for that. It's like the humanity of it is kind of gone. So when you get a group of high-level dancers who are nice and actually communicate, it's so great. When you can have that exchange of techniques, it's lovely.
It is.
But I think we'll leave it there so that I don't keep you too late, because it is coming on to 2:30 now.
Yes, that is fine.
Thank you very much for coming. Are there any final things that you want to say? I know you've got a lot of things in the projects coming up, or is there anything specific you want to talk about?
No, I think we had a really productive chat and we covered a lot of the things, and I can always come back if you want to have a chat more. But thank you so much for inviting me and for asking such insightful questions, because I hope that the more people see them, the more they start appreciating different aspects of dance, and the more it will open their eyes to some of the things they need to consider, whether as a student or as a teacher. And I would love to see our community grow and be a safe, joyful place for everyone. So that's it. That's from me. I hope I get to be like be the teacher that everyone wants to be the dancer that everyone wants to dance with, and just create a community with the people around me. So yeah, thanks for inviting me, having this chat over.
Thank you for coming, and we will see you guys next time.